The Consortium invites you to visit our surrogate near Fort Mara to experience the spectacular scenery and awe-inspiring adventure of its newest attraction, Fractals of the Mists. Relive the greatest and most exciting moments from Tyrion's past as you test your strength, speed, and skill against some of the most formidable opponents from the annals of history. All this and more is waiting for you in the Fractals of the Mists. Warning, some fractals may cause injury, psychic trauma, blindness, or death. By doing this as a surrogate, you officially waive any and all rights to pursue legal damage against the Consortium. Participate at your own risk. November 16th, 2012 was a controversial release for many players as it was the introduction of the first Ascended gear to the game, which seemed like a step away from some of Guild Wars 2's core values, but we're not really interested in that today. We're interested in where players acquired those Ascended rings from, the Fractals of the Mists. This was a new form of repeatable endgame, built on randomness, scaling difficulty, and a touch of gear progression to satisfy those more traditional of MMO players. The Fractals don't take place on planet Tyria, where most story stuff happens. Instead, they're in the Mists. Before there were humans or dwarves, before there were even worlds or stars that light the night sky, there was but one thing in the universe: the Mists. The Mists touch all things. They are what binds the universe together, past, present, and future. They are the source of all good and evil, all matter and knowledge. It is said that all forms of life, no matter how simple or complex, can trace their origins back to this one place. So why am I talking about a 2012 update here at the start of 2017? Well, Fractals have experienced continual development, and no faster did that ramp up than recently in 2016. Guild Wars 2's story might be described as an epic struggle between the free peoples of the world and the titanic elder dragons, but that's not entirely true. In the Fractals of the Mist, we see something of a B-plot, a secondary narrative complementing the first. It grows update by update, dealing with different characters, themes, and places. So what's all that about?
It seemed like a good deal at the time.
The original story of the Fractals, as you may have gathered, is that it was first actually a Consortium-funded attraction for players to visit. This can be kind of confusing to look back at in retrospect, considering that the Consortium were also plugging South Sun Cove as an attraction too when they were first introduced, and both of them ended up being pretty shady deals. While the events of South Sun Cove are fairly well documented and have been firmly put to rest, the story has never, not once yet to this day, done us the kindness of explaining what the hell the Consortium have vested in the Fractals of the Mists. See, should a player decide to take the Consortium's advice and visit the Fractals, travelling into the messy, metaphysical world of the Mists, you might expect to be greeted by more Consortium employees on the other side. But that doesn't happen. Instead, we meet Desa and her crew, who deny much of any association with the Consortium altogether. Practically out of the door, you have this conversation instead. Who are you? I'm Desa, crew chief of the Fractals project. We have chunks of the Mist ready for study, and that's where you come in. Wait, why don't you get some Consortium help? Aren't you with them? Those money-grubbing connivers? It's bad enough I lost my boyfriend to those shady businessmen. Take my advice, reject their advances. Nothing good will come from their machinations. But how did you get connected to that gate in Lion's Arch? Lion's Arch? No, there must be a misunderstanding. We'd never launched this lab from that pirate haven. What's interesting though is that the Consortium do have a very clear interest in getting people into the Fractals, since they made the first portal to get there, and maybe even the subsequent ones. There was some suggestion at the time of the patch that this first portal was instead designed to take us to South Sun, but instead may have gone haywire, leading to the Fractals instead by accident, and that this was somehow just a weird situation the Consortium capitalized on, but those elements of the story have been well and truly killed and buried by the transient nature of the Living World Season 1 format, and are hard to find references to now. ArenaNet don't seem to talk about it much. Even if you do buy that story, it just moves the goalpost. So what caused the accident then? You might not be so crazy as to suspect something conspiratorial going on here, with how we link to Desa and her crew, who don't even like the Consortium. A little while later, in May of 2013, ArenaNet posted a video to YouTube introducing the Consortium to its players.
Well, we designed the Consortium with a very specific purpose in mind. The Consortium is neither good nor evil. The Consortium is capitalist. The Consortium is concerned primarily with its bottom line.
Where already they were openly flirting with the idea of them having a secret agenda and the fact we don't get to see who the true decision makers are. Considering that these days, the Consortium are front runners for collecting leyline magic and a lot of the current events content in direct competition with even the Inquest at times, I'd say keep your mind on them as this video progresses. But for now, let's shift our attention to Desa, where even more contradictions and oddities lie in wait. At first, all seems normal. As players explore and clear fractals, this is the female Asura who speaks to you over voice communicator and remarks on the things you see and do.
Ugh, a swamp. I knew I should have sprayed you all with mosquito repellent before you left. Are those biting things just waiting to... Oh, no, never mind.
Ah, an underground facility. Strange.
I'm reading myriad signals.
And who is that with you? A Norn boy and a female char?
Desa has created a laboratory called the Mistlock Observatory and recruited a crew from which she hopes to study fragments of reality in the mists. The mists, she says, we know so little about, but they contain the history of the world and are worth study. My kind of girl. Unfortunately, these mist-generated areas contain hostile creatures that need to be eradicated, and that's where the player character comes in. Those creatures always regenerate, and somehow the fractals are constantly circularly resetting. But Desa hopes to end it for good one day, and says that there is always studying to be done. That all makes sense. But aside from this, Desa is a character we know very little about. Her backstory is shady to say the least, and considering her odd connection to Lion's Arch via the Consortium, maybe, knowing how she got to doing what she does is fairly important. One of the only things the developers have pointed out about her time before this lab is that she dropped out of Ratasum for reasons unknown. On its own, this fact might not actually be that weird. Plenty of Asura might do this, and particularly those recruited by, say, the Inquest. Interestingly, in a 2013 Living World update, when a new fractal was added to the game, the Thormanova reactor, we learned that Desa did have friends in the Inquest, so maybe that's the idea. She's just an ex-Inquest member, no mystery there. They just haven't told us in plain English. But assuming all of this is true, and important, what could have happened there, and why does she never speak otherwise of the Inquest? Especially if this particular lab was built in association or in defiance of them, why are the Inquest not interested in what Desa's doing now, or at least keeping tabs? But that's just the start of this weirdness. There's also the mystery of Desa's ex-boyfriend, an apparent member of the Consortium you heard her mention a moment ago. On its own, the fact she had a boyfriend wouldn't be so weird, but this character and their modern day capacity in the Consortium, if they still have one, has never been properly outlined for us. But perhaps unlike the dropping out of college mystery, this goes a little deeper than just Chekhov's gun. Most fractals are supposed to be mist recreations of real events and places in Tyria's history. When we see the fractal version of the Thormanova reactor disaster, that's a very close approximation to the real event. Some of them can be in the near past like this, or the adventures of Bram and Rox among the Molten Alliance, and others are so mythic and far back in time we can't even frame them with tangible reference points, like say the Cliffside fractal and freeing a colossal creature from cultists that have it chained to a wall, a mystery worth its own video. But the point is that they are real events. Yet one fractal doesn't exactly follow suit, and that's the uncategorized fractal. Here we see a messy, broken, surreal environment, totally unrecognizable from anything we've seen on Tyria so far, involving broken, floating pieces of Asura geometry. What's weirder about this is how Desa reacts to it.
I need to go.
I'm sorry.
I...
I apologize for leaving you like that. Just...
Never mind. Keep progressing.
You're getting closer to the local
Instability.
Opting not to watch and to take her usual supervisory role, as somehow this one fractal has an emotional impact on her. Any players familiar with this fractal will note the final boss, a male Asura, insane, shouting, "You can't be here," and surrounded by cat golems. The same type of cat golems we see in Desa's lab. Further, any players who build themselves the legendary bow, the Dreamer, will recall the simple task entitled Desa's Sadness, in which you retrieve a letter from this NPC and deliver it to Desa, but never get much of a reaction from her. So, is this the Fractals' recreation of Desa's boyfriend? What's going on here? Why does he seem so distraught?
Breach, broken, falling, screaming, dying!
Why does this fractal affect her so? And in what capacity do the fractals actually have to make things that shouldn't even be real events? I mean, we shouldn't be there, right? We'll come back to that shortly. A more tangible mystery, dropped right in on the first release of Fractals, is Desa's lack of recognition of the Sylvari as a race. The explanation at first is flippant, that she simply doesn't get out much. But this would suggest that she's been in this fractal lab for over a quarter of a century. Yet she really doesn't look that old. Neither did the Consortium even have gates set up to the fractals 25 years ago, but only very recently. So how or when did Desa get here? You might not think this is important and consider this lack of Sylvari recognition just some throwaway line from the first update and nothing more. But it was something specially coded that you would only see if you were actually playing a Sylvari. Desa doesn't recognize you. Is it really possible that an Asura, given their intellect, given the way they share information among one another, given their close proximity at Ratasum to the Grove, just hasn't happened or heard about a Sylvari in over 25 years? It's a thing ArenaNet once again hinted at in the latest Fractal update with a crack in the ice just a few months ago, where Desa curiously remarks at seeing tree people over her voice communicator when seeing a group of nightmare-called Sylvari.
Are those tree people? They look angry. Be careful.
It's like the developers weren't satisfied with this dialogue, this mystery being something only 1/5 of the player base would see, and instead wanted it to be something we would all face. So why? Again, this all begged the question, if she's never even seen a Sylvari, how or when, maybe more importantly, did Desa enter the mists?
Where and when did you come from?
Well, there is one solution. Desa, the main researcher and seeming original main character of this story, might be stuck in the mists just like everyone else. This lab we enter with a selection of Asura and golems are themselves just another resetting fractal. At the point of the first update, this might have just been a fun meta joke the writers were playing with, that the repeatable and circular endgame content grind players would go back to over and over and over again is also an infinite cycle in the story as well. But when the Mistlock Observatory was patched around the time of Rising Flames, very recently in 2016, several new areas and vendors appeared, even an entirely new jumping puzzle at the lab. But did Desa and her NPC co-workers notice? No, they instead remarked to the player that things have always been this way. And when Ellen Keel found Desa's situation suspicious and wanted to take her back to Lion's Arch with her during Living World Season 1, she was unable to. Desa simply reset to her original place and she couldn't get out of the lab. A default state, an echo. Desa doesn't know about the Sylvari because she's been stuck looping in the mists since before they were widespread. She refers to Lion's Arch as little more than an unsuitable pirate haven for the same reason. She didn't know that the Thorma Nova accident involving her friends had happened 1 year before Guild Wars 2's main story started, either because of this same reason. The mysterious boyfriend, whoever they are, is unlikely to be a young Asuran like her, but instead an old man, either retired or pulling the strings of the Consortium, having had a lifetime's opportunity to work his way to the top. Maybe that's why the portal went haywire in 2012? The truth is that there might be no science to be done, no progress actually happening for anyone other than the player character and the loot we get. This has become more than a meta writing joke. It's not a suggestion, it's a fact. Desa and her crew are on a loop, just like the fractals themselves. Why the uncategorized fractal exists, we can't be sure. Where all of this started, or why, or who benefits from this, we can't be sure. But one thing is, these people are doomed to never leave, and they don't even know it. But maybe the Consortium do. Maybe the Inquest do. Maybe that boyfriend is still out there. And then there's Arkk.
My name is Arkk. We should form a mutually beneficial alliance. The odds are against our survival otherwise.
I don't understand. These instability readings are unprecedented. Where are you? Some new form of chaotic instability emanating from your location is threatening the cohesion of the other fractals.
Wait, what could this mean? Was someone already in there ahead of you?
With Return of Living World and active development post Heart of Thorns in 2016, the developers made clear their ambitions for the Fractals of the Mists, that there would be a second story in the game, running parallel to the main one, told through multiple new fractals that are being added. So far, there have been 2 new fractals to pay off on this. First, the Chaos Fractal with Rising Flames, and second, the Nightmare Fractal with a Crack in the Ice. It seems that now, rather than all the fractals being totally random and inconsequential to one another, the new ones will actually link together into a continuing storyline. The Nightmare Fractal, for example, involves a character that we met in the Chaos Fractal before it, and any new fractals to release will further that story even more. The settings of these fractals might still be at any point or place in history, so that will remain as a core fundamental part of the fractal experience, but there is a contemporary narrative thread pulsing through them and the people we meet there. It's kind of the best of both worlds. The setting of the first of these fractals, Chaos, is fairly interesting already. It's a messy combination of many other fractals players will have already visited during their adventures. This is caused by a nefarious at first seeming Asura using a machine he calls the DDR to manipulate the mists. Much like the uncategorized fractal before it, Chaos doesn't seem to depict anything real or tangible. Instead, it's a surreal amalgamation of other things. Perhaps this suggests that the DDR was in use somehow with the uncategorized fractal, but there's no way to be sure. Curiously, the uncategorized fractal itself is set to play for the first time right before new players experience Chaos, and I can't help but feel like this is deliberate in some way. What's amazing about Chaos, though, is the introduction to a new character and the pages of his journal littered throughout the landscape. That character is named Arkk, and he's the one with the DDR. Earlier, I suggested the notion that Desa might have been the main front-running character for Fractals. She's always the one speaking and supervising, after all. But given recent events, I no longer believe that to be true. Desa's just a loop, right? Another fractal like all the others, doomed as a part of the system, the same as the Jade Moore boss or mist recreations of soldiers in the urban fractal. That's where Arkk is different. Arkk is like us, an explorer of the mists.
Oh my! Judging by your slack jaw and torpid silence, it seems I misunderstood your involvement. Please, follow me.
Chaos was added to the game at the same time as the Bloodstone Fen explosion and the magical anomalies began on Tyria. That doesn't seem to be a coincidence, as Arkk suggests in his journal that it was a surge of magic allowing him to gain entry to the mist, kicking this all off. What's so fascinating about him is that for the first time, we seem to have met someone like the player characters or Ellen Keel for that brief window, someone who has an agenda and is doing things in the mists. There's still a chance, I suppose, that he's just a creation of the Fractals after all. I mean, we get to repeat the story of Chaos Fractal endlessly like any others, but that would be a damn elaborate story play to make. The agenda that Arkk has is still very unclear. Even reading the entirety of this Asura's journal in the Chaos Fractal doesn't offer much clarity, just the usual boasting and ego-laden comments you'd expect from the race. But he seems to think using the DDR and what he called the destabilization of the fractals is very important.
Feel free to quit
Whatever it is you imagine you're doing in here.
During the events of Chaos, Arkk sees the player characters and Desa as a threat. He manipulates the fractal to try and dispose of you, blocks out our communication with Desa, shouting cruel comments as he goes. Eventually, when you overcome these obstacles and destroy his DDR, Arkk is forced to flee, vowing to make us regret slowing him down. We next meet him in the Nightmare Fractal. This is a vague reconstruction of the Tower of Nightmares built by the Toxic Alliance in Living World Season 1, and that includes some epic crate bosses and references to the Ouroboros again. While all that stuff is fun, I don't think it's really that relevant to the main story here. Arkk is in the vicinity, as he's detected the presence of what he calls a kernel of remarkable power that he wishes to use to repair his DDR. He's directly referencing events that happened in the Chaos Fractal, and the story is continuing. There are some cells and subtle signs that perhaps Arkk has been in the area for a while experimenting, or maybe even the bosses that we fight are his experiments, that the fractals perhaps to him are just a playground to manipulate different things and bring them together. Maybe there's a suggestion that the fractals are still colliding, but it's much more muted than last time. This time, rather than being an antagonist, Arkk is more of an ally. Realizing that he can utilize our ability to hurt things, something Desa's also been expressly capitalizing on, by the way, he offers us guidance and protection as the fractal commences. At the end, we do sight this kernel of power that he speaks of. It's a giant orb of energy that he quickly seizes and runs off with.
Fantastic work, truly. And now it's time that I terminate our verbal contract. Your recklessness has served my purpose. I'll take the orb. You take solace in knowing your destructive exuberance has at least balanced the ledger between us. I can reconstruct the diaphanous diffraction randomizer, and you no longer have to feel guilty for derailing my mission. Now excuse me, I'm here for more than tourism and indiscriminate pillaging. You're of no further use. Stay out of my way.
With the ledger clear, this is the last we've seen of him. And now you're caught up with the fractals. Presumably the next new one they release, next patch, Arkk will return and we'll get a little bit more on his story. There are many questions still remaining about this and what he's doing in the Mists, where this B plot for Guild Wars 2 is going, and very few of them have been answered. Some people have openly speculated that Arkk may be Desa's long-lost missing boyfriend. Perhaps he's trolling through the Mists and even trying to find her. While this may be true, I find it unlikely right now. Arkk considers himself above Desa. He's dismissive of her. He asks if she was always so stubborn, and I think this is because he knows that she's nothing more than a Mist loop rather than anything real. Further, even if we take the stance that the real Desa, not this looping one, but the real Desa might be lost out in the Mist somewhere, and Arkk seeks to find her, he still doesn't look right for the part. The hologram of Arkk we see still looks fairly young, and again, shouldn't he be at least in his 40s or something by now? There is reference to people in a lab up on Tyria that are working in collaboration with Arkk, and maybe the boyfriend is one of those characters, but probably not Arkk himself. For what it's worth, Arkk also looks nothing like the raving Asura at the end of the uncategorized fractal either, who has more suggestions to be the real boyfriend. But it's quite funny to me that anyone playing through the fractals in chronological order right now will be introduced to Arkk mere moments after meeting that raving Asura as a final boss. Something also notable about him is his armor. He's wearing Aetherblade shoulders. This could absolutely be cosmetic and nothing more, but considering the appearance of another Aetherblade-dressed character in current events, and the fact that the entire faction, led by Mai Trin, seems to have been hiding out in the Mist since Living World Season 1, is that actually a suggestion he could be affiliated with them? That would kind of blow my mind, as the Aetherblades are one of the more interesting loose story threads that haven't been picked up on for a long time, especially considering some seeming Aetherblade involvement with current event stuff up on Tyria right now. Others have suggested he may be Inquest. However, one of the most interesting things about the Nightmare Fractal is that he actually mentions the Inquest. See, Arkk actually believed at first, during Chaos, that we were hired Inquest goons sent out to catch him and settle a debt.
Apologies for the golems and the gladiator. I presumed you were sent to collect a debt. I can see I was hasty.
That's right, Arkk is on the run from them, so the Inquest can't be behind this. They may have simply funded his initial research to get him there before he bolted. All this begs another question. If Arkk wanted to get to the Mist so bad but didn't have the money, why didn't he just travel through Lion's Arch like we do? Was this about the construction of the DDR? It's probable that Arkk just doesn't want to visit the Mists for tourism, as he puts it. He has an ambition. He's playing with the fractals themselves. Deroir and I were actually talking about what that might be around the release of this patch. It's an idea that would tie the main story and Story B up very nicely, and any fans of the show Fringe might know where I'm going with this. What if Arkk is trying to create somewhere safe? What if, seeing the imbalance and chaos caused by the death of elder dragons and wild magic on Tyria, he has a plan to escape? Didn't the apostate, Amarganite, 250 years ago predict destruction should the powers of the universe tip out of balance? Perhaps Ark's intentions really are noble. Whether on behalf of the Aetherblades, the Consortium, or some mysterious new party, the aim is to create a sanctuary. The aim is to create an Arkk. Is it a coincidence that this same patch as the Nightmare Fractal, we're introduced to a mysterious Harbinger character for the challenge mote? Now, largely, I don't believe the challenge mote to have much meaning for the story, which is why I haven't spoken about it much today. But why not use a normal challenge mote orb instead? Why make a whole new character in primeval ancient armor with a fractal backpiece who doesn't speak or move? Many questioned what he could be the Harbinger of, remembering perhaps the missing Sylvari Malik from 2012 who went by a similar name, but I think I have a better idea. See, the Harbinger doesn't say anything directly, no, he doesn't contribute to the story in that way, but if you look closely at his chest, there is a special effect there. There's something most people will have missed. It's an effect we've only seen on the Anniversary mail carrier before. It's an image of a planet. It's an image of a destroyed planet, teasing us right there in the middle of the Arkk story. I think he is a Harbinger, sure. He's a Harbinger of the end times, the end result of what might happen to Tyria or any planet that undergoes such an imbalance. He's a Harbinger of the destruction of Tyria. And our friend Arkk here, for whatever reason, is building around it. So that's the Fractals story, and that's where they're at right now, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. This has been seriously fun for me to put together. This is one of the big mysteries right now, and it is one of the front-running stories. There will be more Fractals. They will progress this, and I hope that now that you've seen this video, next time you play a Fractal, you'll be able to appreciate it on those extra levels too of what the story's doing, which is one of the reasons I found Nightmare so phenomenal when it came out with this patch. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what your theories are. Share this with anyone that you currently play Fractals with so that they can get in on the juicy stuff too. Let me know what you think, and I will see you next time. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Have a great evening.
I couldn't save them. I heard them all pleading. All gone. All on my watch.